I do run a business, right? At the end of the day, I need to make money so that Varia can continue to exist, right?
Right. Wait, these games have to be profitable for them to
What?
continue?
Yeah, I know. It's
Who would've
surprising,
Who would have
isn't it?
thought that?
It's
Hello and welcome to episode number 89 of the Hobbies and Happies podcast, where we talk all about the hobby that makes us happy, tabletop gaming. I'm one of your hosts, Dan.
And I'm Jim, and today we're talking with co-designer of card game Varia, Tessitore, Anthony Tessitore.
All right, so yeah, today we're talking to we got to do it again. Anthony Tessitore.
Tessitore.
Depends if you want to go with the
again?
American pronunciation of Tessitore, or you want to. I mean, it's always more fun. Being Italian and talking like you're Italian is always more fun. So it's
Is it Varia or Varia?
Varia.
Something. I don't know. Maybe that's Russian. I don't know. Sounds Russian.
All right. Well, before we get into the episode, let's talk about our sponsor, Amazon Audible. If you head over to our affiliate link at www.audibletrial.com/hobbies and happiness, I got to enunciate my words and just slow down a little bit. Yes.
Just hold it like this.
Just hold it like it is. Yes. Head over to our affiliate link. You can sign up for your free 30-day trial of Amazon's Audible service. You know, when you sign up for that free 30-day trial, you get a free audiobook added to your account. That's right. One free audiobook added to your account that you can keep forever, even if you cancel before the end of that 30 days. Now, what's even better is if you're an Amazon Prime member, you get 2 free books. 2 free books added to your account. I still have all those credits on my account. I need to use the credits.
Let me borrow some.
Yeah. So again, head over to our affiliate link, sign up for that free trial, get your free credits today. All right. So today, like we've talked about, we're talking with Anthony Tessitore, one of the co-designers and co-founders of Guildhouse Games and co-designer of the card game Varia. Varia is a first-person expandable card game. I almost said trading card game. Now,
It's not.
It's not a trading card game. We've talked at length on this podcast before about the differences between expandable card games and trading card games. This is an expandable card game model. So again, you buy the box, you're going to have everything that you need. And that was they made choices as the reason that they went with that model. You'll learn about here in a minute. But guys, really, before we even get into this, go to playvaria.com. If you want to learn more about the game, head over there right now. You can sign up for, you can be on their email list. But if you head over to their website, you can find everything you need to know about the game. And before we even get into it, you need to go do that. There's a lot of great resources there. And guys, this is a really, really fun card game. We've only played this game a few times, but it is a lot of fun. We want to be doing more content around this game, so go check it out. I know before we even get into this talk, you should go check it out. So go check it out, and then when you do come back for the rest of this podcast, and you know what? Let's just jump right into it right now. Here you go. All right, today on the podcast, we are joined by Anthony Tessitore of Guildhouse Games, LLC, and a designer extraordinaire of the game Varia. So co-founder of Guildhouse Games, LLC, and co-designer of the first-person card game Varia. Anthony, how are you doing today? Thanks for joining us.
good. No, I'm happy to be here. I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I just came off of a long stint. Actually, we were talking about our kids earlier. I had to take my daughter to an appointment like an hour and a half away. It was like a whole day.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to finally just like be in my own space. Really excited to be talking about, hobbies and happiness, right?
Exactly.
So it's feeling good.
Doesn't it just flow? It just flows right there, doesn't it?
It does. It's a good name. Hey, it's a good name.
So
you have it, you have it.
So give him the real quick 411 on the name. Real quick.
Okay.
Real quick.
All right. I was at Walmart with my family. My dad was wondering, like, hey, when are you guys going to be giving me grandkids? And my girlfriend at the time, she was like, we prefer to have hobbies and happiness. So
No way.
and instantly I was like, that is the name. Because I was trying to figure out like a business name before I even knew Dan about it. And and we had hobbies and happiness. And
we went with it.
yeah, we just went with it.
Yeah.
Isn't it? I love when stuff like that happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's like, those kind of stories are my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite, like even like Varia, like the way we came up with that name was, so originally we wanted to call it Victory.
Okay.
Because we wanted, like, the goal of the game was to win, and we were gonna play that up a little bit, and it was like your journey to victory, right? Your journey to winning.
Mm-hmm.
So we went to get the trademark, and obviously there's Victory. It's a card company, like they make playing cards.
Oh,
like
yes,
Victory.
yes.
So we couldn't get the trademark.
Yeah.
And so this is speaking to our inexperience. We had already done the back with the V. And so we were like, now we could have, it wouldn't have cost that much to redo it if we had to, but we really liked it, right?
Yeah.
So we were like, okay, how do we need to come up with a new name that starts with V. That's our constraint. Like, how do we find something with a V in it? And so we were pitching things back and forth, and Sean pitched, Varia. And at first I was like, I don't even know what that means. Like, I hate it. Like,
I hate it.
And he was like, first of all, it means it varies, which is the core of what our game is, because it uses dice. He's like, second of all, it means a collection of works. So we can be free to explore like different flavors of fantasy and different characters, and it will be an all-encompassing title. And he was like, third of all, it's Italian. So I don't understand where your reservations are coming from. And from the beginning of that conversation to the end, I was like, I love this name. Like, this is the greatest name of all time.
You went through the gamut. You went from hating it to absolutely loving it.
It was insane. So I was like, you convinced me. I'm convinced.
That's awesome.
That's sick.
That is hilarious. So, all right. So, for those of you that don't know, like we talked about, Anthony is a co-designer of the card game Varia. So, Anthony, before we even really dive into Varia a little bit, can you tell us and our audience, give us a little backstory and of your history in the card game and in the tabletop space in general?
Yeah, so I got my start writing names and flavor text for Magic the Gathering. So I did that for a number of years. And then I started working with Wizards a little bit more as like a creative consultant. I did some storyboarding with them on like the Amonkhet trailers, things like that. I was really, really interested in design, and I started trying to kind of push into that world a little bit more with Magic. And then I just... I don't know. I felt like I had more in me than what I would have been able to do if I would have continued down that path and worked at Wizards. It would have taken me forever to climb the ladder to get to be able to do really what I wanted to do.
Right.
So I just said, you know what, I'm gonna just I want to make a game. Like, that's really what I want to do. And so I just started working on Varia instead. But this is before I knew, it was Varia. This was before Sean did it.
Right. So before we even get there, you just said some of the three most magical words in the card game space, right? Magic the Gathering. Jim has a question for anyone who has experience in that magical world. Jim, go ahead.
All right. So, depending on how you answer this is going to set up for the rest of the conversation, the whole mood. Okay. All right. So, I need to know, what is your favorite color and or color combination?
Oh, that is a great question. My favorite color is red.
Oh, man.
Okay, cool.
You've cool. Each of the last ones have all been like
good.
Yeah.
Good.
Good for you.
They've been good.
All right. Why? So why is it red?
Why is it red?
Yeah.
So my goes back to when I was a kid. The first deck that I ever made and took to a tournament was Red Burn. It was just straight gas. It was just burn. I don't know, and I really don't. know why. I like over my lifespan with Magic. I mean, I've been following that game since I was 8. So I mean, like this is like 1996, 95.
Okay.
Like Mirage was the set first that I was into.
Yeah.
I'm dating myself here a little bit. But I really don't know what it was about Red that just kind of drew me into it. It was a kind of a mix. It was a mix of like, I really liked the comedy. I have a bad rap in the Magic community for people thinking that I hate comedy writing on Magic cards, which I don't understand like why, because it's not true at all. I have a feeling that Mike Linneman, for anyone who knows the Magic community, Mike Linneman is like, he's really into the art side of things. He and I used to do a podcast together called Snack Time with Mike and Ant, where I would cover the like written side of Flavor and he would cover the art side. But I'm pretty sure he started that rumor just like to annoy me because he knew, just like in a friendly way because he knew it wasn't true. But so anyway, I think when I was a kid, I really appreciated like the funny kind of like comedic flavor that a lot of the red cards had, like Giant Ballard and the Goblins and like Moggs at the time, like Tempest and that sort of thing. But I also just really liked the cool kind of like mage punk vibe of annihilating your opponent with like giant balls of fire. Like just something about that really spoke to me. So so Red, I just kind of like fell in love with, and then over time, I dabbled in Red Black, Red Blue, Red Green, like just
let's not talk about that.
It was always Red. Red was always my
so what was it that pulled you into Magic? Because you talked about Mirage being that first set for you.
Yeah.
Like, what was it that pulled you in?
So this is such a weird story. So I was at my house and my mom's best friend came over with her son. Her son was in high school when I was however old, like 8, right? So he was way older than I was. He came over with his mom and he had his Magic cards with him. And he was just kind of like organizing them on our kitchen table. And I can remember like being just tall enough that I could kind of see, like what they were, but I had no idea like what he was doing. He also wasn't like super nice to me, so he wasn't explaining anything to me. I was like that annoying kid, like, what's that? Like, oh, blah, blah, blah. He was like, kid, get out of here. I'm organizing my stuff. I got a tournament this weekend, But and what makes it weird is that the thing that like I can distinctly remember was a picture of a boat or like a pirate ship, which like in the history of Magic, there were maybe like 3 possible cards like at the time that could have been like it could have been Ghost Ship or like War Barge or like just like awful cards that nobody would ever in their right mind even have. And so like I don't even know why they would be on my kitchen table, right? I'm probably not remembering it correctly, but I just like
it was a long time ago. It's okay.
I remember a boat, and I remember thinking like, those look really cool. I wonder what those were. And then, like almost a year later, I went to my cousin's house, who's like a year older than me, and he was like, "Yo, I got to show you this game that my friends are playing." And he handed me a deck of cards, and I was like, "Oh my god, these are those things." That like I didn't know what they were like, but these are the things. And like at that moment, like when I was holding them, I was just like, I want to know everything about it. It felt like, I don't know, it was weird. It was like this thing that I had like almost liked and then lost and then somehow found me again. Like, and I was just like, I'm going to get really into this. Like, and that was kind of like my first experience. It was like over a year process, but it was I don't know, just something about it really drew me in.
Cool. So it's one of those things where like it pulled you in, but you can't really put your finger on like what exactly it was, but you just felt that pull a little bit.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I've always really, really liked creative things like art and writing and movies and like comic books and those things have always been really attractive to me. Like
Mm-hmm.
especially fantasy property stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And as a kid, I didn't really have a lot of exposure to fantasy things.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was few and far between. It's not like today where there's just like media everywhere. Like
Right.
it was kind of hard
Right.
to find that stuff. And so
We remember.
I just yeah, right. And so like I can remember getting these cards and thinking like, wow, these are like things that I can collect like baseball cards, but they have stuff on them that I'm actually,
Yes.
interested
Yep.
in looking at.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, I don't know. It was more just like the right subject matter. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was kind it was more, and it's hard to describe to people today, but you have to imagine like knowing the kind of media that you want but not being able to find it. And so then when you finally do, you're
Yeah.
just like, I'm all in
Yep.
on this. I
Yes.
might not ever find anything else
Mm-hmm. I think that's
similar,
it. I think that's it right there, because that is something I can 100% relate to.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And honestly, like, I think before you said that, because I've had those experiences many times in the past. Well, okay, maybe
Right.
not many times, but a few. And you know what? If I honestly went back and really thought about what happened in that moment, I think what you just explained is a perfect description. I mean, have you had experience like that before, or you just knew what you wanted, right?
Yeah, I mean, like ever since I was young, it was always like Pokemon was in my life.
Yeah.
And so like pretty much right when it came to the US, I was watching it on
Yeah,
TV.
right.
Right. And I'm a few years younger than you. So like it was from roughly the time I was about 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Then the rest of my life, Pokemon was in it, Yu-Gi-Oh was in
Yeah.
it, every other card game was in it. So it's a little bit different for me.
Yeah, yeah. But for
Right.
me, like it was very different because at a young age, I didn't have all those things
Mm-hmm.
in my life. But because when I experienced these things older, but it was
Yeah.
just like Ant just said, I didn't know exactly what it was that I was looking for, and then in that moment, it's like that's it right there. So
Right.
so that's really
I
cool.
had a similar experience with like the D&D third edition monster manual. I remember when someone put that in my lap and I was like, this is like my Bible. Like this is literally like it was because I'm also like I went to school for engineering, so I have kind of like a science geared brain somewhat. And so it was like a combination of my favorite creative things, but with tables. And I was like, this is like, I'm like, you're hitting every, cell
Yep.
in my head is like all
Yep.
excited at the same time.
Yep.
You know,
Instantly when you were talking about, there weren't a whole lot of fantasy things back in the day. It was really just D&D popped straight into my head. I'm like, okay, if it wasn't Magic, if you weren't like old enough for Magic, then the only other thing was really D&D.
Yeah.
Or it was
Right.
fantasy books that most likely don't
Right.
have any pictures, so little kids ain't gonna really care about it at that point. But the monster manual, anything for third edition, and then Magic, it was just beautiful.
Now, okay, you just brought up engineering, and I'm glad you did because I wanted to go there next. So, I'd say about 3-4 minutes ago, you were touching on always being interested in creative something creative, right? And so how did you go from always wanting to do something creatively, but then go into engineering, and now you're back into like the creative industry? Can you talk about like how did that work out for you? Because for me, again, very similar experience. I am an engineer. I work as an engineer. So again,
Right.
and the way I think about it is it's complete opposite sides of my brain that's being interacted with. So can you just talk about like how that worked for you and your experience there?
Yeah, I think there's really two things. The first is that I was always really good at math and science, and I always found them really interesting. Like of all the subjects, they were my favorite subjects in school. And my dad was a mechanical engineer. So it was one of those things where like I still love art and creativity, and I personally prefer to be using that side of my brain,
Mm-hmm.
but I also just happen to be naturally good at like the math and the meticulous kind of
Mm-hmm.
sciencey stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had an appetite for it. And
Mm-hmm.
so when it was time to choose, I could have really gone either way in terms of like what I went to school for. And I definitely had some kind of like nudging, like gentle, like, well,
Yeah.
this is safer. Like,
Yep.
if
Yep.
you go this way, you'll get a good degree. You'll
Yep.
be able to
Better job.
always leverage it. You'll get a better job. It was the safe route, really.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those things where like, so I did it. I actually got my master's. So I have my master's in mechanical engineering. I went to work and I started doing it like in practice for about 3 months, and I was like, I hate it. I hate it. I hate this. I have made a terrible mistake, and I need to change
Yeah.
directions. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, I think it just had a lot to do with, I was fortunate in that I could make a choice.
Mm-hmm.
I think for my own personality, I think I made the wrong choice, but that's okay. That happens, right?
Right.
The other thing I did want to bring up, though, is that I do disagree with you a little bit in that I think that in some facets of engineering, you can be very creative.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are some tricks that I learned in being an engineer, and some approaches that I've learned in terms of like how to think about a problem and how to approach a problem
Mm-hmm.
that I employ pretty much every day, like in both, my 9 to 5, as well as like anytime I'm working on like a design, especially Varia. There are things that like very engineering kind of sciencey mindsets that you can apply
Mm-hmm.
to create stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I always kind of appreciate.
Well, so it's interesting because we had on Justin Gary on our podcast a few weeks ago. I can't remember
Right.
when, but he has a podcast and book, How to Think Like a Game Designer, and he's very much of that mentality of anybody can be creative, right? And for me, again, learning to use that side of my brain at a later part in my life, right? It was very
Right.
intimidating. It was very intimidating to me initially because, again, coming from that science engineering background of very technical thought process, everything was just very rigid. Like the way I thought about
Yes.
stuff was very rigid. But like you just said, and I very much agree with you, because there is a beauty, there is an art to problem solving. Problem solving is a creative process. It very much is. But I didn't realize, like, I've never, like, it clicked, and at some point it clicked from the standpoint of just the way I thought about it. And from one thing that I've looked back on and realized is, I think a lot of it to me just comes back to the mentality. You can very easily be doing something creative and just not know it. And so it's as
Right.
long as you flip your mindset in the right direction, then that is, like, to me, that's the key. That's the key to unlock that. At least it was for me. Like, that was key to me unlocking that creativity that was here. I had to figure out
Right.
what was that key.
I think that's like so. At least when I was in school, I would hear a lot that people would say that like part of what you're learning in engineering school was to think like an engineer, right? And so people would say that a lot, but they would never explain to you like what that meant,
Yes.
And it took me until I was I was a senior. I did what's called a 3+2 program. So my senior year, while everyone else was taking like stupid electives like painting because they could, right? I was taking master's courses so that
Mm-hmm.
I could get my master's in 5 years instead of 6.
Right.
But like, so in that 4th year, it finally clicked for me that I think thinking like an engineer is that you learn all of the rules. You're taught these very rigid structures and math based like fundamentals, and this is physically how everything works, and you just kind of create this massive pool of knowledge, right, and of kind of how things around you work. And then they come to you with a problem, right, and they say, okay, here's what we need to do. I need you to take that pool of knowledge and come up with a solution, right? And that's where I feel like you're thinking like an engineer. You've created this knowledge base that you can then apply creatively because you are confident in your knowledge of how things work and what expectations you should have, right? And like, it takes, those first 3 years, you're just like doing math and learning this stuff, and like, it feels like you're a robot, but it's not until it's kind of like learning an instrument. Like the first 3 years of learning an instrument, it's all chords and like, okay, this and that. And then once you have the language, then you can start creating, songs. And I found it to be similar in that respect.
So how have you applied all that stuff you just talked about to designing a card game like Varia? Is there one thing that you've learned specifically throughout your engineering career that you have learned to apply that to card design, essentially?
Yes. So my answer to you is I'll give you a somewhat of an engineering problem, right? Okay. So I worked at a nuclear power plant. I worked on the ECCC team, which was the emergency core cooling components. I think it was what the last C was. I don't remember. Nuclear is all acronyms. I used to know like 1,000. But it was the emergency core cooling system, right? And what that means is like the core is melting down. We need to immediately flood it with water, right? This is like, it's an emergency.
Right.
And so one of the kind of like, and this is creative engineering, right? One of the things that I found to be really interesting was I was like, okay, here's the problem. We have a core, and the core is, below ground level. It's in the basement of the facility, right? Because that's the safest place to have it. And we need to get water there as fast as humanly possible, right? And at first you might think like, okay, well, I'm going to install like a really big pump, right? And it's like, oh, that's fine. Like a pump might move water there really quickly, but what if the pump fails? Who's going to check it? We're going to constantly have to run tests on that pump. We're going to constantly have to make sure that like all those parts are in working order, blah, 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 right? There's so many different avenues that you can go down, right? What the emergency core cooling system was a giant tank of water at the highest possible elevation that they could get it on site, and one monstrous valve. That was it.
Yep.
And so like, and the way that they made sure that that valve went off was that it was an explosive valve.
Nice.
So it blew up.
Nice.
And because the creative process there and the simplified engineering process there is, I need to get water down as fast as possible with zero failure. How do I do that? I use gravity. Because gravity will always exist, number one. Number two, I blow the valve apart because that way I simultaneously guarantee that that sucker opens. And I also recognize that in an emergency, I really don't care about having to replace that valve. Versus having to replace the core and like a 10-mile radius of people, right? So that lesson kind of like really stuck with me. I remember learning that like my first day there, because that was my system that I was responsible for. I was like, it's a valve, that's it. And they're like, yeah, but it's genius. Like you had to appreciate the simple genius there. And so
I appreciate that 100%.
So that stuck with me. And so now anytime I design anything, I always try to ask myself, can this be simpler? Like, am I over engineering what this is? Or can I just put a tank and use gravity. Like, is there something simpler that I can do to get the same, to reach the same goal? And so that's something that I apply all the time, whether it's in, Varia design or, day to day.
I feel like if it's one thing that engineers are known for, it's over designing and over engineering stuff.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely. 100%.
I think game designers are the same way. And especially like there's an industry term called feature creep for a reason, right? Because you're being creative and you're constantly thinking like, oh, what if we did this? What if we had this? What if we did this? Like, this would be cool. This would be neat. And all of a sudden your card looks like a menu. It's got like 50 million things on it. Does it tell a cool story? Yeah, but like, you're losing people, right? You could tell just as much of a story with one rules line.
You know what I just thought of? The card looks like the secret layers for Magic, the arts, the lands. Yeah, it's got just all that's text of
how a land works.
It's literally what I just thought of. So, all right, well, I'm glad you started, bringing in Varia with that, because one thing I really wanted to touch on was like the design of the game Varia. So, we were talking a little bit before, and I was going through these, I think they were like design diaries, okay, of, you were talking about the design of Varia. And you came up with the Varia's 3 laws of design. So I was wondering if you could kind of talk us through your process of how you came to those 3 laws of design.
So I'm not going to lie, you're going to have to remind me what those are, because I wrote that a while ago.
Yep. All right. So
I very much appreciate that you did your research. Yeah. That's good. It'll come back as soon as you say it. It'll trigger.
So the first one is the player is the star of the show. The second one is story narrative equals game narrative, and the third one is for every action there is time for a reaction.
Yes, beautiful. Okay, thank you. So
like,
this
whoever
is
came up with that is a genius.
Oh,
He's like, man, that's brilliant.
He's like, I know it. I just wanted him to read them.
I honestly forgot, because these are so like when I sat down initially to try to come up with what Varia is, I was having a really strong disconnect with the games I was playing at the time. One of them was Magic. Okay. So the first one, the player is the star of the show, right? One of the reasons why I was having a disconnect from Magic was because Planeswalkers had just come out. And I felt like that card to me completely removed me from the narrative. I felt like my equivalent is like, I think of Magic as an RTS. So like a StarCraft or a Command and Conquer, like you are the general and you control all the resources and the people and the things and what they do, right? You're the general, right? So imagine you're playing StarCraft and then you summon in like another general next to you who is like working with you kind of, but not. And like, they interact with units differently than you do. It's kind of like, it took me out of the story. It made it feel much more mechanical than it did before. And so like, I was having a disconnect there. And so that was where I settled on, and again, I'm an engineer. So whenever I work on something, I like to create constraints. I like to create these are the tenets, right? That I'm going to work inside of. And so that was the first one. I was like, I really want the player to be the star again, because I just felt like I was too removed from everything.
Can I interject real quick for those that don't know, with Magic, and the reason why Ant is talking about this is, in Magic, you are literally told you are a planeswalker. And many people had this exact same disconnect with the introduction of planeswalkers, because the thought is, well, if I'm a planeswalker, what are planeswalkers now doing in this game. So I 100% understand where that comes from. But for those of you that don't know, that's where that disconnect kind of came from. So
5-star generals control 4-star generals, guys. They're still high up there. You're just higher.
That's true. That's true. But my counter to you would be if I said to you, destroy target planeswalker.
I also already had that question. Okay, I first started playing. I'm like, can I just target him with it?
Exactly.
Because 5-star generals and 4-star generals are both human beings, and if I have something that says destroy target human being,
counterspell. Counterspell.
I'm immune, but this guy over here, go for it.
Yeah.
So that was really the first one. The second one kind of tied into that, like gameplay narrative equals story narrative. I was really into narrative design at the time, and for anyone who doesn't know what narrative design is, it's a methodology of game design where every decision that you make mechanically is somehow connected to the narrative that you're trying to tell. So, like, if you put, guns in your game, they exist because they are a part of a narrative. They're not just there. Is kind of the idea, right? That like everything that you're doing ties to the story. Another example of that is like Assassin's Creed. Their tutorial was run like as if you were inside of the Animus and you were like learning how things work. So like it was simultaneously a tutorial level, but it was done in a way that like didn't remove from the story. It actually furthered the story. So like that's narrative design, right? And so from the get-go, I was like, I want to make sure that anything that we are doing sits in that narrative design bucket. It's not mechanical just to be mechanical. Like it has to have form and function, right?
Right.
I
say that all the time. Function, man.
The third one, oh my gosh, I forget now.
For every action, there's a time for a reaction.
Yes. Okay, so that came from at the time. This is all just kind of like the timing of things. There was a Magic deck at the time called Eggs. I don't know if anyone is familiar with
Zero drops.
Deck. It was like you would just sit there, and your opponent would like, play these things and crack the eggs. They were like spell bombs or something, and you would like tap them and put them in your discard pile, and then play a card, and they would all come back, and then you would crack them again, and it was just like I literally felt like I was at Benihana's. Like I'm just watching you make an omelet. Like what am I? Why am I here? Like, and
Solitaire's a thing.
And so my brain of like wanting to see the story, because that's kind of just how I am, right? I would try to imagine, like, what am I doing? Like, you and I are planeswalkers. We're on an epic battlefield. I just summoned a dragon. And now I'm just standing here watching you make an omelet for like an hour. Like, why have I not punched you in the face by now? Like, I don't understand. It drove me crazy.
And now we have food tokens in the game too. This has been here for a little bit. So.
I just I couldn't believe it. Like it drove me nuts. It drove me absolutely insane. And I come from like one of the other loves that I have since I was a kid was fighting games like Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter. Like I am obsessed with fighting games. And what I always appreciated about those was like if you messed around even a little bit, I would uppercut you off the screen. Like it just, you and I were working with the same amount of time, and so I really wanted
You'd uppercut them off the bridge, and they'd fall into the spikes, right?
I sat down to design Varia under the idea that I wanted to make the player the star, that I wanted to make sure that we shared time. That like you could crack eggs if you want, but I am going to punch you. Like I wanted to make sure that was a thing. And I also wanted to make sure that there was a solid narrative. Those were like the three key starting points, right? Like that was like first mark on the canvas. Like how do I achieve that?
Okay.
Right.
All right. Cool. So The next thing I want to ask is sources of inspiration for Varia. Did you have any games that you pulled from? Because I'm gonna be honest with you, the first time I picked up this game, I looked at it and said, "Oh, it's Flesh and Blood." That's literally where my mind went. So
that's an interesting story.
Because first person card game, first person card game, and it's fighting. I'm like, this is interesting. I want to know more. So
yeah, so that's actually a horror story.
Oh boy,
to a degree.
Okay.
So we spent I think like almost 7 years designing Varia's core system, right? Like, and so I had Varia was getting ready to come out. This was in 2019. We were like just getting ready to like do trailer videos and like really start talking it up and whatnot. And I had a friend at the time who worked for Channel Fireball.
Okay.
And so I was showing him the game and he was like, "This is really cool. Like, I'm going to try to get this in front of LSV. Like, I'm going to show this to John Sasso, blah, 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 whatever."
Yeah.
And so he did. He like took the game and he showed it to them. And they came back and they said, "Hey, this game is cool. Can you explain to us how it's different from this game?"
Oh,
and I was like, so they sent me the Flesh and Blood rules packet, like the PDF.
Yeah.
And I read it and I was like, it was like my worst nightmare because we had thought coming into it that we had a completely unique product, that nothing like it, like all of our marketing was written to say like, this is a never before seen game. Like, it's trading cards or like it's cards as you have never played with them before. Like, that's how like all of our marketing was positioned. Like, we were ready to launch. And honestly, looking back, it was a godsend, because if we would have come out that way and then people would have been like, "But Flesh and Blood's right over there," then we would have looked like absolute idiots.
Yeah.
So it was actually a blessing, but I remember getting that email and just being crushed initially. Because the first thing I saw was like actions on like a time chain. And I was like, no way is this real life. Like, how is this possible?
Wow.
But then the more I read how that game works, and like, this is not a knock on that game. Like, there are different things for different people. Right. But the more I read about how that game functioned, the better I felt, because a lot of the design decisions that they made were things that we trialed early and didn't like. Like a pitch system for resources. We had that early on. We didn't like it. Our playtesters didn't like it. They were like, "I want to play my cards. I don't want to throw my cards away." And so we dumped it. We didn't use it. They were doing this
into the deck.
They were doing this single, like, I play card, you play card, I play card, you play card. And that was where we started. And we found that to be kind of like boring. We liked the idea of like, no, here's my plan. It's a puzzle. Like, you need to try to solve this kind of whole scenario at once. Like, we just felt like showing more things at a time created more opportunities in design and more interesting avenues of gameplay and things like that. So it like excited me again. I was like, they made mistakes. They did things that we didn't like at all. You know? And so then I got to the end of the booklet and I saw the company and I was like, I'm going to look them up. And I looked them up and I was like, these people are a massive company. They've got like insane backing and name recognition. I was like, this is not good. Like, so then I felt bad again. But yeah, from that day, like, I just like, one thing that I always felt good about and I still feel good about is that I'm very confident in the way that our game plays. I think that while there are similarities in terms of like, yes, it's hero centric, right? And it's actions on like a timeline. I think that the gameplay that we put forward is unique. I think that it does capture a corner of the market in a sense, in a fun and unique way. And it's like, that's something that I still feel really good about. That I really do think that we landed on something special,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that's why we're still doing it.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Yeah.
like
I
so many
would
years
I would
later.
definitely have to agree with you there. With the first time I played Varia, yes, I couldn't get Flesh and Blood out of my head just because that I knew Flesh and Blood, knew kind of how it worked, and everything that I did I was comparing it to Flesh and Blood. However, Varia is a very different game, very much its own thing, very unique. I do think if you've played Flesh and Blood, I think you would enjoy a game like Varia for sure. But it is still it very much its own unique experience. So very very much liked it. Now we kind of got off on a tangent on Flesh and Blood, but I'm glad we did, because
No.
I'll be honest with you. I was, as I'm researching for this, I'm looking at dates. I'm like, okay, when did Flesh and Blood come out? When did Varia come out? Is there some overlap? But it's crazy to me that you didn't know of it at all at the time. That's just a crazy story to me. Absolutely crazy.
It's insane. I will tell you, from a very personally, it was an insane experience.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe what I was reading. I was like it was insane. And like, honestly, the one I'll say the one really great thing is that they were able to prove that the market exists
Mm,
for a game like this. And like, I think it's super healthy for there to be more than one option, in the same way that like there's Magic, there's Yu-Gi-Oh, there's Pokemon, there's like a slew of different varieties of these RTS kind of top-down general games,
mhm.
right? I think it's good to have options in this
Oh yeah,
hero centric kind of space.
absolutely.
And so it was really cool to watch a larger company just like come out guns blazing, basically,
Hmm.
and carve out a space in the market that like we had just kind of theorized existed.
Right.
And so now we know, like, oh, we were like,
Yeah.
on the right path.
Oh
Like, it
yeah.
definitely exists.
Yeah.
People really dig it.
Hmm.
And so now it's more just a matter of like clawing into the market share
Hmm.
versus like trying to create it, right?
Right.
Which
Right.
is a whole different animal.
Right.
Um,
Right. Right.
so it's not a bad.
Yeah.
Like I said, like I played Flesh and Blood. It's a cool game. Like, I've got friends who play it. There's people in our Discord who love it. Like,
Hmm.
I have nothing against that game at all.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
it's totally doing some awesome stuff.
Hmm.
I just think that the hard thing is now we have to do work to convince people that we're not a clone.
Yeah.
Like, we're not just
Right. Right.
like Flesh
Right.
and Blood. We're not. It's in
Right.
the same way that like Pokemon and Magic aren't
Right.
the same game.
Right. So going back to the sources of inspiration for Varia, did you have any games that you really looked to and kind of stole some themes or ideas from when you were in the course of designing the game?
Yeah, for sure. So the origins of the game stemmed from my wife and I playing War, actually, with just like a deck of 52 cards.
Mhm.
So we used to sit on our porch and we would just play War together and like drink wine or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so then eventually we got bored and we started playing War with a hand of 3 cards instead of just like randomly coming off the top of the deck.
Ah.
And just that alone like changed things a little bit, and it felt more like like a a fight, like a battle, like
Uh-huh.
like, oh, when do I put my queen?
Mhm.
How long do I hold this ace? Like,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. And so that little dynamic, I was like, man, this is kind of interesting. Like, I wonder if I could make this into a game where, like, and my mind, again, like, I love fantasy, so my mind went to like, well, I'm a wizard and she's a warrior. Like, is there a way I could theme these cards to feel like a wizard fighting a warrior, and we're kind of just like making decisions like as we battle through our deck? That was kind of the initial inception of the idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we were building it out, and certain needs were kind of popping up, right? One of the games that I leaned on was D&D in terms of mechanical inspiration. So we have, beyond the dice, obviously, right? Like, the dice is a pretty big
Mm-hmm.
analog there, but the concept of like hitting and missing,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the inspirations for some of the actions that you'd be doing, the classes, like we took a approach to segmenting our cards based off of attributes, right, instead of classes. So the attributes that we pulled from were the 6 core D&D attributes, pretty much, with minor tweaks, plus an additional one in spirit. So there is a pretty decent inspiration from D&D there. There's also some inspiration from Magic. Like, I did pull some of the things that I loved, like the color pie. I think that Magic's color pie is an absolutely beautiful piece of design, and I really wanted to make sure that the game had deck building in it. And so we have our own kind of color pie, basically, that helps us segment mechanics in a way that isn't overly restrictive.
So you brought up the dice. So Varia is a card and dice game, ladies and gentlemen. Card and dice. So in regards to the dice, why did you decide to add dice to a card game? Number one.
That's a great question.
Those dice have screwed me over for the last time.
So where did that idea come from? Why decide to add dice? And how many people have walked away from Varia the moment they hear the word dice?
Oh, so I'll answer the second one first. All the time. All the time. And honestly, that's okay. Like, I really don't mind that, because I've also had people walk away immediately when they see cards. They're like, oh, a card game, I don't like it. And they leave. And it's like, it's all right. I mean, if I walked into a music store and someone was like hawking CDs and they were like, it's country, I'd be like, bye. Like, I would just leave, because I know I don't like country.
Right.
And so, like, that's okay to me. Like, that actually does a lot of work for me, because what I wouldn't want to do is spend 20 minutes on a pitch and then have someone go like, well, I don't like dice. It's like, ugh, okay, like, this game isn't for you then. Like, so it's really nice having it like right on the surface. I think that's actually healthy. But to answer your first question, there's 2 reasons. One is to exactly for what you just said, where you said the dice have screwed me for the last time, right? So the beautiful thing about dice is that they give you an out. So if you're playing the game and you lose, you can always blame the dice. When you win, I guarantee you're going to say, I played the right cards at the right time. I made all the right decisions. Right?
He's not
That's
wrong.
how you'll
I hate
think.
RNG, Dan.
But
So you're
when
saying
you
this is like a
lose-
skill versus RNG?
Yeah.
No. I'm just saying that the dice provide a nice cushion for our egos. When in the same way that like when you're playing Magic, it's easy to say like, oh, if I just drew one more land, or like, oh, if I just drew my counters, like, it wasn't me, I didn't play wrong, my deck failed me. The randomness of my deck failed me, right? But when you win, you're not usually going to say like, I just drew gas, like I just drew the right stuff. You're going to say like, I played really well. Like, that's just how human brains work, right? That's okay.
Right.
And so like the dice are a great scapegoat, right? But the more mechanical reason why we included them is because when we were working on Varia, we took the resource system completely out of the game, like out of the deck. So like our deck has no resources in it. So like when you play Magic, it's a 60 card deck, but it's really only like 35 cards that you're actually using, right? The rest of it is a resource. Right. And so our decks all of a sudden, like, they only need to be 30 cards, because everything that you draw is something you're going to play, right? And so just from that alone, all of a sudden we were seeing a lot more of our deck than we would if it was also clogged up with resource cards, right? On top of that, because of the way Varia plays, you're playing 2 to 3 cards every turn. And so we have you draw 2 cards every turn, whether it's you as the first player or your opponent. So you were ripping through your deck at like a really fast speed. So it was a combination of like, I have a 30 card deck, I'm drawing 2 cards every single turn. The odds of me seeing every card in my deck hit 100% by the like 8th turn. So the deck all of a sudden had like almost no randomness in it at all, compared to like a game of Magic or a game of Flesh and Blood or some other game where you have this larger deck full of resources.
Right.
And so what we found was that games got so sweaty, like so overly technical, because you basically just had your whole deck all the time.
Yeah.
Like by like the 5th or 6th turn. And so like there was a little bit of a replayability issue there, because you would just like, if you imagine a game of Magic, like any given card in that deck, like you might play it once per game, maybe. Like sometimes you'll have a game, especially in Commander, where like you don't see a card for like 2 or 3 games, right? And so that gives you natural variety. Like you can, there's a longevity to the life of that deck. In Varia, like I'll see the one-off in my deck every game, like every single game. I'll see the 3 of cards 3 times every game. And so it becomes incredibly repetitive somewhat, right? And so by interjecting the dice, we took variance and put it back into the game, because like variance had been removed from the deck side of things. And so we added variance back in the form of the dice to give the cards a little bit more of like a repeatability. And one of the reasons why that repeatability was so important to us was because we knew going in that we wanted to have an out-of-the-box format that was approachable to someone who had less than $20 in their pocket. Like we really wanted to combat this, like the stigma at the time, which was like, if it was a card game, you had to have at least $500 to like be competitive. We absolutely hated that with a passion, mostly because we loved card games and we couldn't convince our friends to play with us because they didn't want to fork over the money.
Fork over the cash.
And we didn't want to play down. Like we didn't want to just play with like crap cards either.
Right.
So we wanted to create a game where that problem didn't exist. And one of the ways we were going to do that was through this pre-con format that we had the idea for. And we were like, well, the pre-con decks, they can't get boring after 3 games. Like that can't be a thing, you know? And so the dice do a lot of work there in preventing that staleness to a degree.
How much convincing?
That was the original.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I'm saying that was like that was the original thought process.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Since then, we've more embraced them as like, you know, a way to interject a little bit of casual fun and remove some sweatiness from the game, make it more approachable. There's other things that dice bring, but that was the initial reason why we put it in.
Gotcha. You know, one thing that we talk about a lot when it comes to card games is, you know, skill versus RNG. You know, like Jim just talked about that, right? And so for us, you know, I feel like typically whenever people think about, you know, you just touched on it, right? Not drawing through your entire deck, right? So like for me, when I think of a card game, you know, you think initial variance because of the cards that you're going to draw. And as a competitive player, it's like we want to limit variance as much as possible because we want to be the best person at the table. What's one of the ways you can do that is be in control of that RNG, right? So the minute you throw another variable into that mix, then it's that, right? It's a variable. So from a competitive standpoint, has there been much feedback to say, you know, we don't like adding more RNG to a competitive format, for example, or has it been pretty positive? Because again, for me, thinking about it competitively, you know, I want to know if I'm the best person at the table. I don't want it to be, oh, it was because of the dice, because you just said, if I won, it's because I did something right. So how does that work like from a competitive standpoint, or is it a non-issue?
It's actually not an issue at all. And the reason it's not an issue at all is because, and again, this is more like kind of human psychology, right? We will make a game out of anything. Like we will we are naturally geared to make a game out of anything. And more often than not, we will find a way to compete with each other, right? And so really Varia's competitiveness comes from, can I better allocate my dice than you? Like, that's really what it is. It's like, it's a challenge between two people where we both, like, it's not like I have a bunch of dice and you have none,
Right.
right? Like,
Right.
we both have the same six-sided cubes, right?
Right.
We like we both have the same odds. And so it's more a challenge of like, can I take the right risks? Can I plan the right cards in the right sequence so that I have a slight edge on you? So that when we do roll our dice, game after game after game, I'm gonna continue to come out on top. It becomes a challenge like anything else, right? Where it's really just a challenge of knowing that you have a D6 and a D4. Can you prove that you are better at rolling them at the right times, really, and putting your cards in the right places? Because one of the things that Varia lets you do is they let you, or it lets you take RNG and make it strategic. So like every card pretty much comes with a D4 and a D6, right? But they also come with modifiers. They come with numbers, and that's another kind of D&D inspiration, right? Where like one attack could be 3 plus a D6, another attack could be 10 plus a D6, right? Another attack could be 0, but you get 2D6, right? And so each attack has its own flavor, it has its own modifier, right? And so looking at the table, like when your opponent puts down a pair of, 3 power actions, so a 3 plus a D6, right? You can look at that and you can say, okay, well, in my hand, I have one card that has 5 power. So if I put that down, I'm going to have pretty good odds that I'm going to beat out my opponent. I have 2 other cards in my hand. I have one that is my get out of jail card. Like when I play this, like the rules on the card make it so that the dice actually don't matter.
Right.
Kind of like a counter spell, right? I could just play that and take care of the other 3 plus a D6, right? But I also have a card in my hand that's a 2 plus a D6. Maybe I'll push my luck a little bit and I'll put it down here and I'll save that really valuable counterspell for later, right? But you're making those decisions of like where you're putting your dice, where you're putting your modifiers. Like it's all tactical. And you're doing so under the assumption that like on average, those are going to be 3.5. The dice, I mean, right?
Right.
Like on average, it's worth 3.5.
Right.
So the dice quickly become something that like you can just average out in terms of like how well you're playing, how you're playing, what constitutes a good decision versus a bad decision. For you start using them as a tool,
Right.
More so than them being this just like random thing that gets in the way.
Right.
And I think that's the main difference between like Varia's RNG and like a game where, like Magic, where you can just get mana screwed and there's nothing you can do about it. You could shuffle your deck all day and you could just draw 7 lands. Like I think back to like the Pro Tour where LSV was in the finals and he mulliganed to like 3.
Yeah, mulligan to 3.
Right? Which is like a game designer's nightmare. Like I don't want that to be the experience, And so what's really nice about Varia is that your deck really isn't that random. Like you're going to see all of your cards by like turn 6, turn 5, right? The randomness is in the dice and they're guaranteed to always be the same and you can control it. Like you can make it work for you. And so like I've had games, plenty of games of Varia where it feels like I'm way more in control. than like a game of Magic, where I just feel like this game just beat me, like straight up. I drew 7 lands, and then I drew the 1 creature that didn't match any of those lands.
Right.
It's like, it's very different.
Right. I wanna ask the person who's been playing card games his entire life what he initially thought about adding dice to a card game, and after playing it, we've played it a few times, and kind of what your thought process is now, because I know I kind of just want Jim to tell you what his initial thought was, and then kind of where he's at now, because I'm kind of interested after playing a couple games, kind of just what he thought about it. So go ahead, Jim.
So the first time we played it, I decided to play as the Brute character. I forget his name exactly.
Volcanic Warrior.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was just like, you know what? I know we're both noobs at this game, and I had a theory. I'm like, okay, if I could just play the character that is more simple and just play big dumb stuff, I'm gonna win. Like, it's my theory. And the first game I won, right? So I was just like, all right, perfect. And the second one we played, Dan was a little bit more in control of the pace of that game. And he was getting used to the mechanics of the assassin.
The Shadow Assassin.
The Shadow Assassin. And so after I was watching him play, I was just like, you know what? Having him play a bunch of cards layered on top, rolling these dice, giving him now even better odds of being able to get over my defense or past my attacks. And I was just like, these dice, throwing in that little bit of RNG makes it actually a lot of fun. Yeah. Because it's just like, what am I going to get? Am I going to get it? And especially when there's a time, like you were saying, you play the two defense with a D6 versus a 3 and a D6. It's like, okay, can I lose? Always assume the worst for yourself, right? It's like, all right, he's going to roll a 6. He's going to deal 9 damage. I'm just going to prevent 3 of it. Can I eat 6 damage here? And if if the off chance you take no damage, super happy.
And you feel so smart.
It's like, dude, you feel so good.
When you do it, you just sort of like, it's like you get this feeling of like, like I knew it. I knew that was going to happen. You know,
the feeling that you get from rolling it and just like either coming out on top or just knowing you did better than you were expecting. It's a great feeling.
And it's funny you said that about the fun, right? And like that was another main reason why we like latched on the dice so hard, was that like they're fun. Like there's something about them that is fun. And like this is true in like my favorite example is like if you go to a casino, right? So when I was a kid, I'm not a kid. I was allowed to go to a casino.
He was a kid gambling, guys. So, holy cow!
I consider myself like when I was 21, like I was still a kid, right? Because now I'm a 35-year-old dad. But when I was younger, let's say, right, my dad used to take me to the casino with him because he was really into like poker and blackjack and stuff like that, right? So I would go with him and my uncle, who's his brother. So the 3 of us would go. They would sit down, they would play blackjack. They were very serious. And I would just kind of stand away from the table. I wasn't even allowed to be near the table, right? I would kind of stand over and away and kind of watch them, drink free beer, whatever. And inevitably, at the end of the night, they would go to the craps table. So whether they were playing blackjack or pie gow or poker, whatever the serious game was, the sweaty game, at the end of the night, they would go play craps, right? And that's where they would wind down and they would have a good time. If you ever go to a casino, you go to the craps table, it's always a party. Everyone's standing around the table. You don't even really have to be playing. Everyone's hooting, hollering, high-fiving. They're all having the best time. And I asked him that. I was like, why do you guys come over here? And he was like, it's just fun. It's just more fun. And he's like, just something about it makes me feel like I can let loose. And I was like, why? He's like, I don't know, dice are so random. And I was like, Dad, I'm like, you were just playing a game with a 52 card deck minimum, minimum 52. I mean, the casino decks are like way bigger than that, right?
I think they're like 7 decks or something.
Yeah. I'm like, craps is 2d6. There's only so many
Combinations. Yeah.
possibilities. And like, if you're just betting if you're just betting 6 and 8, like your odds are always 40 something percent. Like I could not wrap my brain around that. I was like, this is way easier. Like in terms of odds.
Yeah, right. In terms of probabilities.
And it wasn't until I said that it clicked for me. I was like, it's easier. It's actually easier because it's right there. It's 6 numbers on a cube.
Yeah.
A deck of 52 cards, it's hard for people to wrap their brain around it. There's so many variables in there, right? That like you kind of get lost, and then they're like, oh, you got to count cards and blah, 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 right? But with dice, it's so surface level that people can track it. Like your average person can track it. And because it's so easy and surface level, they are able to let their guard down and have more fun because they're not trying to count 52 different things. Right. They're just like, no, that thing has 6 sides. I know what that is. And it's like something about that enables people to just kind of like let their guard down a little bit and embrace the fun a little bit more. And I can't think of like a better thing to inject into a game than that. Like,
so why not 2d6s then instead of 1d6 and 1d4?
The main reason for that is because we wanted you to be able to roll them at the same time and not get confused.
Okay. That
Different
makes sense.
colors.
That makes sense.
People are colorblind.
Yeah, that's true too.
Different symbols?
Well, but hang on. That is a very elegant and engineer-like problem solving.
That's gravity.
Yeah, really. That's a simple solution.
And that was Sean's suggestion. Originally, we did have 2d6, and he suggested, he was like, let's just use a different shaped die. And I was like, dude, genius.
Yeah.
I mean, as soon as I heard it, I was like, that's what I'm looking for. That's let's use gravity. And then and believe it or not, we used to spell it out on the card, and then another buddy of mine was like, just put the number inside of a square and a triangle, and I was like, genius. Like, it's like, use the facade of the object that I literally just explained to you. Like, everyone knows what a cube is, but like, it's hard in the time, like when you're in the muck of trying to build something, it's really hard to see, the forest for the trees. I think that's the terminology, right?
Yeah.
And so like any time that you can bring an outsider who knows literally nothing, bring them in. Don't even explain to them the game yet. Just explain to them the problems you're having.
Yeah.
Like, well, I keep having to type out this and that. And they're just like, dude, triangle and a square. And you're like, oh my God, Mike, I could kiss you. So Mike Burns, if you happen to be listening to this, Mike Burns is a magic artist. I played Varia with him. I hadn't even played it with him yet. I explained it to him, and he was the one who said that. He was like, just use a triangle and a square.
That's awesome.
I was like, I love you.
That's awesome.
You solved all the problems. But
cool.
But yeah, that's the main reason. Is we wanted you to be able to roll them at the same time and not get confused.
Cool.
The reason we did a D4 for accuracy or for focus, right, which is like whether or not you can hit or miss,
right,
is because the original inspiration for that mechanic was armor class in D&D, and so you roll a D20 and you try to determine if you hit or miss, right? And the average armor class is a 10 usually, so like right in the middle of the die, right?
Gotcha.
And so interestingly enough, so I didn't want the opponent to not be rolling dice. I wanted us both to kind of like be rolling dice simultaneously.
Right.
And so interestingly enough, when 2 players are rolling clashing D4s at base value, you get a similar similar spread to an armor class of 10 and rolling a D20. So it like ends up sitting in like a very similar spread, like possibility spread.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Okay.
So that was why we used D4s.
Cool. So I wanted to ask about constructed formats. Because we for the length of this so far, you've talked about essentially the pre-con decks. Okay, was the game kind of designed with that pre-con philosophy in mind? Because I think it was like just recently, you guys introduced some constructed type formats. But was there constructed formats or playability in the thought process from the original design, or kind of how did you guys go about that design process?
Yes. So if we only were if we weren't designing for constructed, the attributes wouldn't exist at all. Because then we would just say like our game is a pre-con game.
Gotcha.
You play out of the box. There would be no need for those symbols at all.
Gotcha.
Those symbols exist wholly for constructed purposes.
Gotcha.
So it was very much something that we wanted to do from day one. We have a kind of like a grander vision for what Varia could be.
Okay.
And that's also existed from day one. And so some of the decisions that we made in the beginning in creating the system that Varia is, was done so knowing where we wanted to go.
Okay.
So without giving too much away, my analog is that like when you play D&D, you have the player's handbook, and then you have the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Monster Manual, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the player's handbook teaches you like how to fight and how to build a character. And the Dungeon Master's Guide teaches you like how to build a dungeon, how to run a campaign, and then the Monster Manual helps populate the world that you made, right?
Right.
Varia right now is if only the player handbook existed.
Okay.
We gave you tools to build a character. We taught you how to fight stuff, and that's it. So what are you left with? Well, you just have to fight each other right now.
Right.
But we have always known and thought about wanting to be able to have more than that, wanting to be able to say like you and your friend fight something else or adventure together or, do whatever. And so that has always been in the back of our minds from day one. And like a lot of the decisions we've made are factoring that in as well.
So PvE confirmed? PvE confirmed?
I will say that it is something that is on the top of our mind constantly.
Okay.
And it is something that we are actively working on.
Cool. Awesome.
And just to kind of to not be so nebulous in terms of like what do I mean, right? Like, what do you mean? So like for deck constructed, right? We use attributes on our cards.
Right.
And so if you look at the bottom right corner of a Varia card, you can have anywhere from 0 to 7 symbols. And those symbols designate like the attribute requirement of the card. So like when you're deck building, right? Let's say you were building we refer to it as let's just say level 7, right? What that means is that the cards in your deck, the attributes on those cards, when you are adding them up, you have to be level 7 or less. So a card that, for example, has, let's say, 3 faith symbols on it. Yeah, one of our attributes is faith. Let's say it has 3 on it. That card is a level 3 card. You must be building at least level 3 to just be able to put it in your deck at all.
Okay.
Right? Once you do, your deck is considered level 3 faith. Okay. So if you took another card that had 4 spirit symbols on it, right? Put that into your deck. Now your deck is level 7. It is 4 levels of spirit and 3 levels of faith. So your deck is now level 7. From that point forward, you can add any other card to your deck that has 4 or less spirit, any other card that has 3 or less faith. It will not change the level of your deck, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
But what you can't do is add, say, a card that has an intellect symbol on it. Because the second you do that, even if it only has 1 intellect symbol, the second you do that, your deck is now level 8. And I've gone above the constraint. We agreed we're going to build at level 7. Right?
Gotcha.
That is a slightly complex way to do that, where it's one level at a time. If I was not thinking about a potential PvE scenario, then we could have simplified that to just be like 1, 2, or 3, and then say that when you're deck building, you had to either be all the same, or 2 and 1, or 3 of a color. You know what I mean? Like we could have like really simplified it, similar to how like Hearthstone just handled Death Knights, right? It's like 3, 2, or 1, and it's very simple and elegant.
I love it.
The reason, so that it's funny, and when that came out, I was like, oh, that's our system. We've been doing that for years now, right? It was cool to see it in practice. But the reason we did up to 7 and beyond is because we want you to be able to start at level 1 with a level 1 character and play through an adventure, and then say, okay, we're going to level up. Now we're level 1. Now we're level 2. Now we're level 3. Now we're level 4. Now we're level 5. Like we had that image in our head. We wanted you to be able to have a campaign with Varia and go from level 0 to level 10. And the only way that we could facilitate that was by breaking out the attributes more into smaller chunks than just 1, 2, 3, right? So that's really what I mean when I say that we made some additional considerations because we have had PvE on our minds since the inception. If we didn't, we would have just done what Hearthstone did, 3, 2, 1. That's the way you do it. You don't care about having a leveling system. Right.
So I wanted to touch on real quick the essentially the card game, the model, okay, the model of the game. So Varia is, like we talked about, I think we talked about this a little bit before the call, I think, but Varia is an expandable card game. I know, Ant, you had talked about it's an XCG. We've talked on the channel before about ECG's expandable card games and that type of model. So essentially, guys, what that means is when you buy the box, when you buy a box, you have all the cards that you need to hit the ground running and to play a game, right? Was there, and I know you've talked about it a little bit, but was there a specific reason you went with that model as opposed to a TCG or CCG model with booster boxes and booster packs? Because, I mean, again, I feel like you talk to a lot of people in this space and you just mentioned card game, their mind immediately goes to booster packs and that TCG model. Was that main reason like accessibility, like you talked about, or were there other decisions kind of behind that, other choices behind that decision?
Yeah, there's actually multiple. So the first and most paramount one was accessibility. So Sean and I are huge card game players. Like we love playing card games. One of the main problems we always had was like getting more people to play the game with us. Like we had a lot of friends who were gamers and they wouldn't touch Magic. They wouldn't touch Yu-Gi-Oh. They wouldn't touch Pokemon. Like, because the accessibility issue of like, they didn't want to buy in, knowing that even if they dropped $30-40, they were still leagues behind where we were. Right. And so that paywall was a big deal for them. And so we wanted to make sure that wasn't an issue with our game. We wanted to make a game that our friends would play with us, really. And we also wanted to make sure that other play groups didn't have to deal with what we were dealing with. So that was one main driver. Another important facet of that, though, is that we're an indie company. And trading card games, by their very nature, they demand a constant influx of product. Like, you cannot have a trading card game and put out one expansion a year. Like, you really can't do it. Like, your game will die. And not because it's not a good game, but because that's the model. Like, you need to have a funnel and a constant just churning of product in order to keep it alive. And that is a very daunting task for basically two guys in their garage, right? Like
Right.
you
Right.
need a huge amount of financial backing in order to do that right.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, or you have to get really creative, right?
Yeah.
And the game that we wanted to make, we knew it was going to be art intensive, and there was no way we could do it. Like we weren't going to be able to do it to the level that we wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the second major factor. And the third major factor was when you introduce a monetization method like that, and that's what a trading card game is. It's it's a monetization choice, right?
It's a print money machine, right?
But it's going to inform your design.
Yeah.
Like you will make design decisions based
Yeah.
on the fact that you know that this is my monetization strategy.
Yeah.
Like I need chase cards, I need
that's true.
super powered mythics, I need common chaff that is going to be able to create a nice not parallel. What's the word? Juxtaposition with my mythic. Like you need that. You need to basically create a differential so that it exists for the purposes of monetization. Like, and when you don't have that, like when your game is like, no, you just buy it and you get the things, then all of a sudden, like every single card in your game can be equal power level. Like the idea of common versus rare isn't a thing. Like it's more just like punch versus kick.
Yeah.
And it's freeing in a way. Like you're free to just design, in my opinion, a better experience because you're not worrying about like, well, how am I going to monetize this? It's like, well, I just put the price on the box.
Yeah.
Like it's
I never thought about it that way.
Right.
It's just, it goes down,
Yeah.
That was another like major reason why we went with, what we did was because we didn't want to be constrained in that way,
I've never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
That's another one of those problem solving things, different way to think about the problem at hand. And I never framed it in that. I've never pictured it framed it in that way at all. That's very, very interesting. Now, do you guys worry at all that this type of model will affect or prohibit the growth of the game at all? Or is that a non-issue? You don't even really think that'll become an issue?
Well, so a game like this comes with its own demands, right? We could have gone two ways, right? We could have just sold it as a board game, basically, and just said, these are the classes that we want to exist in the main game. Here's an expansion or two. And that's really it, and like, this is the Varia ecosystem, and we could have just stopped there. If your goal is that you want to continue to grow the game and you want to create and continue to excite a community, then really you can't escape the funnel to some aspect. Like we do need to continue to put things out to keep people interested, right? But what we can put out is much smaller and will still achieve the same goal. So something that you alluded to before was like what we've been doing with like our constructed formats, right? Put out our first constructed only product. I think I have one actually. Yeah, right here. Product placement. So one of the interesting things was we wanted to expand on the game, but we didn't want to develop an entire new class, right? We were like, how do we offer something to players that is constructed only? It's only going to be available in like a constructed format. And so in thinking about, the fact that we're an expandable card game, we don't have the same needs like I was speaking to earlier that a trading card game has. I had this interesting thought experiment. I was like, what is the smallest possible expansion that we could do? And what we came up with was 1 pack. So like, this is it. This is the entire expansion. It's 1 booster pack. It's always the same 15 cards every single time. And so what we decided on was, let's do something that everybody needs: equipment. And so it's just 15 different pieces of, that's why we called it arms and armor. It's 15 different pieces of arms and armor. And so it offers you a variety of different things. Like if you've been playing out of the box for a really long time, like let's say you guys have been playing Volcanic Warrior versus Shadow Assassin a few times, you're really getting the hang of it. You want to mix things up a little bit. You don't want to go crazy, just a little bit. Take your items away and pull out 30 gold worth of items from this pack, and then play the exact same class. I guarantee you'll have a different experience. Because all of a sudden your warrior that used to have an axe and a hammer, now he has a bow and arrow. It's like, I need to approach this a bit differently, right? Yeah. Or that assassin that used to have the cloak and dagger, now he has a meteor morning star. It's like, all right, well, how do I use this in a sneaky way? It just, like, that is enough to change things up, right? So it gave players who were really into out of the box and really into sealed, basically, a way to dip their toe a little bit into constructed, right? It's not super scary. But also the people who are super into constructed and building their own things, we could just give them a bunch of new toys to play with, because your item loadout is super important. Like as is important as it is in like a game like Flesh and Blood, right? Where it really kind of helps you dictate like what your deck does. Or as important as picking your commander, right? That will inform what you put in your deck. In Varia, what items you have equipped very much speak to what your deck does or doesn't do. So just the simple act of changing them up can really open up different strategies, different considerations, different builds, different lines of play. And so that was how we met the challenge of like, let's make the smallest expansion ever.
That's really cool.
So with this pack, right? You said there's 15 cards in it. So let's say I know you said it's all the same card, but maybe there's a chase foil in every single pack. One different card is foil, huh? It's not like that, is it?
So I have gotten that suggestion before, in different ways, right? I'm on the fence with those, like,
people would love
so like I do run a business, right? Like I do, at the end of the day, I need to make money so that Varia can continue to exist, right? And so like part of me like,
wait, these games have to be profitable for them to continue?
Yeah,
what?
I know. It's surprising.
Who would have thought that? You know how many times I've had to tell people that, though? I've had to tell people that so many times. It's like the things that they want, it's like, dude, they have to make money. Like, if you want it to be successful in the long term, because the goal is long-term success, right? You want the game to keep growing. They gotta be profitable. They gotta make money. So thank you for saying that. I'm sorry.
No, it's no problem. I wrestle with that a lot, because like I know that there are collectors and players who like they would enjoy that, and they would buy way more product than they need to play the game, because they want that extra bling. And I do feel like we are kind of like denying people that want right now. I don't know. I also know that there are some people who just like, even the existence of that makes them feel left out or less than, because they know that they can't afford to do those things. And even if like you're playing with the same pieces, it's kind of like if we sat down to play chess and my pieces were plastic and yours were 14 karat gold, like it would put me in a mental state where I would feel like maybe I'm not as good at this game as I thought I was, or like maybe I don't take it as
Shininess
seriously.
doesn't make you better, guys. It doesn't make you
It
better.
doesn't, but it also, like, I would think, because coming from somebody who, like,
Psychology.
right, like, and growing up, like, we didn't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, when I would go play baseball, for example, and I had, the off the shelf bat from, Dick's Sporting Goods, and some other kid had like the brand new T52 bat with like the aluminum and the nitrous tank inside, or whatever they used to do. They had these crazy bats when I was a kid, right?
Right.
But part of you would think like, and I just had like the solid metal one, and it's like, even if like going into that game, I had all the confidence of the world in that, like, no, I'm just a really good hitter. Like I could hit, I could give me a broomstick, I'll be good,
Right.
Like you go in with that confidence, but then you see this other person with just like the stuff, and it does deflate you a little bit. Like it's hard to not let it deflate you. And so the same part of me that like feels bad that we're denying people who I know would love to support us further, and they don't really have a good way to do that. And they do love the game and they really want to like make it special for them. And we don't really have a great way of doing that. The part of me that wants to create something like a product for them also wants to prevent the other side of that coin from happening, of like people just feeling like ostracized just because they don't, because they don't have money. Like, I don't like, I have a very personal thing against doing that. Like, I don't like to ever put someone in that position, because I've been in that position and it doesn't feel good.
So maybe not just like the base expansion, right? So maybe the original pack you could have all just the standard, but I don't know, maybe like a random name off the top of my head, like a collector booster or something like that. Just randomly thrown out there. It could have all 15, maybe even, who knows, maybe even different artworks. I don't know.
Yeah.
This has never been done before, Dan.
Not in any card game ever.
Never been done. I'm actually just getting an email from LSV. Magic does this. Okay. All right. I'm sorry.
We think about it a lot. I'll put it that way.
Yeah,
We've thought about many different ways of kind of trying to tackle that.
I mean, at the end of the day, and I think there's not a person in the world who would begrudge or think less of a company who has principles and who has a strict or a certain design philosophy, and every choice they make is going to inform that philosophy. Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, you're going to get more people that respect you more when you stick to that core ideology, that core philosophy. And that's exactly what it sounds like you all have with your company. And I think that's awesome.
You could always bring it into different avenues of them being able to support you. You can make accessories for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Deck boxes, sleeves, even if you're teaming up with say any other company that's already producing it, but then you just throw on your logos, throw on whatever artwork.
Right.
There's other ways to do it rather than just being like, oh, I'm giving you guys foil cards if you want.
There's other ways to do it than the norm, right? Than the norm and the expected way to do it in this space. Right.
Yeah.
So
we want to, and that's the trick. Like, we want to just try to figure out a way to do it that doesn't feel alienating. And kind of like equal opportunity kind of thing. Like one of our community members actually had a really cool idea where it was similar to your idea with like the booster packs, right? Where it was this like, it was like a booster pack of like 5 random Varia cards that already exist, but they're all foil, right? They're just like full foil or like full art or whatever. And the idea was that the packs are randomized rewards, and you sell the packs to stores. So like to the LGSs, right? Not to the player. Sell them to the LGSs only.
Yes.
Tell the LGSs, like, these are not for resale. These are, you buy these from me, and then you run $5 Varia tournaments,
Right.
like $5 buy-in Varia tournaments, and you give these out as your prize support.
Yep.
And so like you might buy a box of these boosters from me, the manufacturer, for like $50. You'll make 200 if you run enough events.
Right.
Like there's enough in the box for you to make your money back basically, and then some, right?
Right.
And then as a player, the way that you get your bling is by playing the game. You come in, play the game. Maybe everyone who plays, they get a participation pack.
You earn it.
And then the higher tier, they get more, right? And so then that way, when you do sit down across
that
from, in that chess scenario, you come in with your plastic pieces, because I just bought the game off the shelf,
Right.
right?
Right.
My opponent's is all blinged out, and I go, oh, man.
This guy's good.
Yeah. Well, what you could say is, like, how did you get those? And what you're expecting is, oh, I'm rich,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And what they'll say is, I play every week.
Yeah.
You know, and you're like, oh. And then it becomes this thing where it's like, oh, it's not about
I can do that.
It's not about what's in my pocket. Like it's not about the fact that I just spent my last $20 just to get this deck.
Right.
Right. It's about like, oh yeah, I have time. Like everybody has time.
Right.
You know, like, and we all have an equal amount of it, depending on your health, right? But the idea is that like, no matter how rich you are, you're not going to make it past 90, probably. You know, like we're all kind of in the same boat in that respect. So making it so that the way that you buy your bling is through your time and effort, I think is a really interesting idea. We've been really trying to figure out if that's feasible.
Yeah.
It takes a lot more effort on our part. It takes a lot more effort on the LGS's part. It takes a lot more trust on the LGS's part, right?
Right.
Than it does for me to just like make a booster foil product and like throw it up on our store. You know, like that's the easy path.
Right.
And I think one thing, kind of speaking to what you're saying before, and like the ethics of Guildhouse Games, like our company, one thing that we're committed to is not just taking the easy path just to turn a buck. That's never been our goal. We never make decisions that way ever. And we're not doing it now, like in terms of player rewards. We know there's a need. We know that there's a gap there. But we're trying to do it in a way that makes sense to us and like our ethics, and is also fair to as many people as possible.
It's funny, when he just started talking about that, I get a notification on my watch that says Marvel Snap, new daily challenge available. Take that for what you will, guys. Take that for what you will. if you're in, I'm just gonna leave it at that. Okay. All right. One last thing I want to get into before we talk about our favorite segment here. We talked about you talked about upcoming content, right? Some spoilers maybe. But we're coming up on this new class that's being released pretty soon. I can't remember the exact date. I did pre-order it today. Not gonna lie. I was wondering if you can.
I knew that was you. I saw your name. I was like that. I was like, I'm like 90% sure.
I bought one for me and one for you, Jim. Okay.
Oh, awesome. Scammed.
Yeah, the Mecha Trap Artificer.
All right, and then can you talk about that? And then are there, because I see some coming soon stuff on the website. Can you talk at all about anything else past the Artificer?
Yes. Okay. So our class is in pre-order right now. It's the Mecha Trap Artificer. So our old method of doing things was we released. So we had what we call like season 1, where we released 7 classes all at once, 1 in each attribute, because our game has 7 attributes. It's aggression, tenacity, faith, spirit, intellect, charisma, and subtlety. That's kind of like where all of our stuff sits. So we had 1 class in each attribute. And then we released a 8th class, like kind of just standalone on its own. That was the Dragon Knight. And that class was a dual attribute. It was aggression and tenacity mixed together. Then we did season 2. We released 7 all again at once, 1 in each attribute. And then again, we're following it up with this single class that is a mix of 2 attributes. This time it's intellect and subtlety. And so that's kind of what this class is it's kind of the capstone.
Mm.
So as I've said now a few times, I'm a huge fan of D&D and like tabletop RPGs. I love to play the rogue, and I will play the rogue every chance I get. And I have played every variation of rogue I can possibly come up with. I've been a thief rogue.
Some arcane trickster.
One rogue that I played one time was I just focused solely on traps. I laid traps, I collected traps. The way I fought was with traps. Like everything I did just involved traps. And in doing so, I had took some levels of artificer, like in playing this D&D game, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I
Mm-hmm.
in essence, a rogue who specializes in the construction of traps. The way that our Varia version does it is that she has built a literal trap room around herself in the form of a mech that she drives around. And so this thing is I want you to feel like is just imagine if you took a trapped room from any RPG and you were able to pilot it and just like drive it around and like cause it to punch people. That's what it feels like to be this class. If you're playing against it, to put some fear in you, imagine if
Nice.
so. Yeah, that's in pre-order right now. We haven't announced the official like when we're shipping them to everyone yet, only because it's been sitting in it's at a dock, sitting there waiting to get through customs. One of the joys of being an indie company.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So we get cut a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, as soon as we get the go ahead, like as soon as basically we wait until we hear them say it's on a truck headed towards Pennsylvania, and at that point, then we do some quick math and we say like, okay, we're going to ship, end of April.
Gotcha.
So,
do you have any news or tidbits on any classes or anything coming next after
yes.
that?
So the main reason why I did that whole kind of spiel about the way we were doing our releases is that one of the things that we've learned, kind of going back to what I was speaking to before, the funnel of stuff, right? What we learned is that it's not good to release everything all at once, and then nothing for a year, and then something small, and then nothing for a year, and then everything all at once. Like it's too staccato, and like we lose people. So really, what we should have done is release like 2 at a time every 3 months. And if we would have done 2 at a time every 3 to 6 months, we would have ended up with exactly the same amount of classes that we have right now. Like since 2020. But we would have maintained like a steady cadence. And so what we are moving towards with our next release is that rather than releasing a boatload all at once, we're going to release them in pairs. So we're similar to kind of like how we have our our starter kit structured, where it's 2 classes that are a cool matchup, like in one box. We're gonna pivot to releasing them in paired sets of like, here's 2 new classes that are interesting in one box. So
I like that.
That's
I like that.
that's already like production. So that's why if you go on our website, there's 2 coming soons that are sitting there. It's because those will get announced. There's 2 classes. They'll get announced at the same time. They're in a dual set. And so that'll come out. And then what you could then expect moving forward is that after a much shorter amount of time, you'll see another 2, and then another 2, and another 2.
All right.
And then we'll supplement that in between with, these kind of things. Cause like this was actually super popular and people really enjoyed it. So I think we'll definitely do that again.
Cool. When is there a timetable on when we can expect the announcement for those 2 classes? Any idea on that?
So
Soon?
right now the plan is to announce them before the end of the year.
Okay.
This is now I'm talking indie stuff. We also have to contend with manufacturers and their lines. Like being indie is its own animal. And so we try really hard to not announce things until we have a pretty firm like idea that stuff is going to happen.
Sure.
So our tentative like goal that we feel like is very feasible is the end of this year, we would announce it. There's a chance that'll move up if, we get lucky or if, our manufacturers are nice to us.
Right.
But yeah, the goal right now is by the end of the year, we'll have announced that.
Okay. Cool. Well, I can tell you, I'll be looking forward to that because throughout the course of this entire conversation, I am remembering back to when we played this game, and I'm like, man, that was a lot of fun, and I got to get back into this. This game is a lot of fun, guys. So I know we're going to be saying this quite often, but guys, if you haven't picked it up, do yourself a favor, at least pick up that 2-player starter kit and at least check the game out. So, all right, well. With that, we're going to talk about our favorite segment, segment, and that is the card of the week. So, like every time we talk to a guest, we like to ask our guest to choose our card of the week for us. And Ant was kind enough to choose this week's card of the week for us. So, Ant, take it away.
So the card that I have selected is, of course, a Varia card. And that card is Decapitate. So Decapitate is a card that shows up in the Volcanic Warrior class. It's a class that's actually in that starter kit that Dan was mentioning. But what this card is it is a giant, massive attack that when you roll your dice, if you roll the maximum value for your focus, which is what determines your accuracy for an attack. So to use like layman terms, if you crit, right?
Yep.
Then the power of the card it goes to infinity.
Wow.
When I saw that, I'm like, is this for real? Is this for real right now?
So the reason I picked that card is because not only do I feel like it is the quintessential like Varia card, because it wholly embraces the dice in a really cool way. And it also does it in a way that's not broken. The way that Varia's system works is that like everything, I use the term soft counter. So like if you're playing Magic, if you're familiar with that game, there's counter spells, you play it, and it just says counter target spell. In my mind, that's a hard counter. I played the card, I countered the thing, done, right? A soft counter is like a mana leak, where I play a thing and it says, hey, I'm threatening to counter this.
Right.
Are you going to do anything about it?
Right.
And then you have the choice to pay an additional amount of mana to not counter it, right?
Right.
It's like that's a soft counter.
Right.
At Varia's core is this mechanic of hitting and missing. And furthermore, this mechanic of distance, being engaged or disengaged. And so like if we are disengaged or like far apart from each other, then any of our attacks that don't have range like just automatically miss.
Right.
When we are engaged, if I try to hit you and my focus is lower than your block's focus, like my accuracy is lower than your avoidance, basically, then I will also miss. So there are a lot of opportunities for you to use cards to soft counter me, or position in such a way where you're like, look, like if you don't do anything, your card isn't going to work, right? And so decapitate, while it seems scary at face value, like, oh my god, infinity damage, like I'm just going to win the game. It only has 5 accuracy, and it costs 9 of your 10 action points. So when you play it, like there's really not a lot you can do to make it more accurate. It's like really hard to make it more accurate. So your opponent can just literally play like, and Decapitate's like a level 7 aggression card. It's like the pinnacle card in the deck. Like it's like ultimate is how we refer to it, like around the office, right? It's like the big play. It's like the big thing. It's the Shivan Dragon, right? But you can just dodge it. Like, you can just play dodge.
It used to be okay.
Oh,
all right.
You know? And it's like, it's really easy to deal with it. And you can always just back up. Like you can also just, like Decapitate doesn't have ranged. So you can just like go like this. You know, it's literally like when boxers like they dodge like a roundhouse, like, or like a big like right hook. They just do that, and it's like, oh, you just wasted so much energy, you know, and I didn't do anything. And so Decapitate is like it's like one of my favorite cards because it always gets that reaction that you guys had like earlier, where it's like,
I had that reaction.
Read it, and they're like, you're insane. Like you can't print this. Like this is literally crazy. Like you cannot print this. And sometimes like in the first game that you play it, the opponent's like, that card's so broken. That sucks. Like this is annoying, blah blah. And then like the more you play, the more you realize like this isn't really that great. Like it's, you know, in the same way that like Shivan Dragon, like the more you play Magic and the more that Shivan Dragon gets terrored or countered or Doombladed, you're just like, Shivan Dragon's not good. So, like it's not good at all. Like, and then you take it out. You don't even put it. Yeah, you don't even put it in your deck. So like, that's one of the main reasons why I picked it is, but also because like I don't know if you can see this. So I have this thing that like we're in my office. So I have this thing framed. This is like our first $1. This is me as a kid. So like I look at this all the time because it reminds me that like the kid version of me would absolutely love the fact that I'm doing this with my free time. But also like this is the very first Varia playtest card ever. And it's Decapitate was one of them. And it had the exact same effect of like, it used to be, we used to use all the different dice. So this used a D20. So if you rolled the D20 and you got a 20, then you would decapitate them basically.
Right.
But that card had a very visceral effect on our playtesters to the same vein that you experienced when you first read it. Like they read the card and they went, what? Like I just roll and I win. Like how is that fair? Because we want you to think that way, because in thinking that way, then when you learn about how Varia's mechanics actually work, then you go like, oh wow, like this is actually a really deep fighting system that makes sense. Like I'll get distance on you, I'll dodge out of the way, you know. But that card alone, it's the only card that survived those early play tests, like all the way to print. So I have this kind of like as simultaneously as like a reminder to myself of like where we've been, or like where we've come from, but also that we were still able to maintain like the core that we wanted. Like when we set out to do this, there we had this vision and we succeeded,
Right.
you know?
Right. Right.
So that's the other kind of reason that Decapitate in my mind is like super special.
Right. Right.
It's also red. It's also red.
There you go, Jim.
It's red.
I do still like red.
Yeah. 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 Well, that's awesome. I love hearing the stories behind the reasons for these picks for a card of the week. And this one right here is no different. So thanks a lot, Ant, for this week's card of the week. Again, that is Decapitate from, of course, Varia. So again, guys, that is this week's card of the week. So thanks again. But as we wrap up here, Anthony, thank you so much. This was just another amazing conversation. We had such a great time. And you know what, Ant, for our audience, can you let them all know where can people find you on the internet and where can they find out more about Varia?
Sure. So the easiest way to learn about Varia is to go to playvaria.com. So that is our main website. It's got a bunch of information on it. It's got links to all of our socials, like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We've just started an initiative to really amp up our social media presence because Sean and I are both terrible at it, and we finally found some help, which is great. So we've got like a new Facebook group that we're trying to grow, and we've got Discord and things like that. So that's all linked at playvaria.com. If you want to get in touch with me, the person, I would say the only easy way to do that would be either to join our Discord, because I'm on there all the time, or this new Facebook group that we have, because I'm kind of just on there a lot, like interacting with the community.
Mm-hmm.
Or my personal Twitter is just at Anthony Tessitore. So I'm there as well.
I thought it was Tessitore.
Tessitore, yeah. Tessitore.
All right, guys. So be sure to check out all the links that we're gonna leave in the description and show notes. So again, if you guys want to check out more about Varia, Guildhouse Games as a company, and all those links, we'll be sure to leave all of those in the descriptions of the show. So again, Ant, thank you so much. This was such an awesome conversation. Had a lot of fun. And you know what? We look forward to maybe doing it again sometime. So thanks a lot for joining us today, Ant.
Love to. Yeah, for sure. This has been great. I've really enjoyed it as well. So yeah, anytime you want to have me back, I'm more than happy to do it.
I think we've set a limit. Or not a limit, a record.
I
think we set a record.
Yes.
These conversations are just getting better and better and better.
Mm-hmm.
And Jim and I were talking when we hung up the call, and it's like I don't want to just stop. Like
Yeah.
I can't just stop these conversations because we're getting into a lot of good territory, especially with the designers.
We're going to start pushing 4 hours soon. I
am not Joe Rogan. Nobody's Joe Rogan except Joe Rogan, right? But still, like we're getting a lot of really great conversations, and especially when we talk to the designers, I really love hearing the heart and soul of a company and a game and the reason behind it. Yeah. So, Anthony was just telling us so many great stories about Varia and the company and decisions they made. It's eye-opening for me, and it's like, you heard in that interview, it's just a lot of stuff was clicking for me.
When he was going over, sorry to cut you off. When he was going over the different levels inside the deck that you can have of like the 7 different classes, and he was then talking about like PvE, going on adventures with your friends, having the co-op stuff. I'm just like, this is amazing.
I know, dude.
I liked it so much more.
Exactly. And like for me, it's like, okay, it solidified it in my mind of, okay, I need to pick this game up again and really dive into it. I really, really need to dive into it. So again, head over to playvaria.com, find out more information about Varia. You know what, Jim? Where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter, Twitch, and Instagram at Jim Morgan, HNH. You
guys can find me on Twitter at _DJ Campbell, Instagram, Daniel.G.Campbell. Head over to our website, hobbiesandhappiness.com. Find links to all of our stuff right there. Find links to YouTube, pretty much everything there. And again, if you're watching on YouTube and you haven't yet, make sure you like that video, hit that subscribe button so you can get notified when we release any new content on our channel. You know what, guys? Hopefully you enjoyed this chat and this conversation. We had, again, a lot of fun. You know what? Let us know if there's anyone that you want us to talk to. Leave us a comment down below. Shoot us an email of conversations you would like to see us have on the
Richard
channel.
Nixon.
That's be a kind of impossible.
It's not impossible. We can get one of those Ouija boards.
Oh, goodness
and summon
gracious.
All right, maybe not.
All right, well, with that, thanks everybody for being here. We'll catch you in the next episode.
Take care.